Bendy and the Ink Machine. This is an in-depth look on Chapter 2 and its development, and the story of Chapter 1 can be found in the description if you haven't watched it already. Now with that out of the way, don't touch that dial, because tonight, we're playing all the greatest hits.
With the massive success of Chapter 1, the Meatly and Mike now knew that they could carry on with Bendy, but now needed to flesh out a plot. Since Chapter 1 was more of an experiment, they sat down and decided to flesh out the beats of the story while also having to water down details since they only had 6 weeks to update Chapter 1 and also make Chapter 2.
Like, the Meatly and I had to sit down and be like, okay, what's the story, right? Like, what is the whole point? And so we had the story, and we continue to build on the story, but what exists right now in Chapter 1 and 2, that's not the original vision, right? Chapter 1 and 2 from scratch was made in 6 weeks. We had to cut a lot.
Chapter 2 began production on February 14th, just 4 days after Chapter 1 was released. 2 days later, the first fan art contest was announced, and on March 27th, we got our first trailer. We hear a recording play of some whistling as the camera slowly zooms out to reveal a cutout of Bendy with a pentagram behind it. The video fades into a shot of a hallway flooded with ink and wooden planks all around. The bass kicks up and we can hear a voice say, "Rest your head, it's time for bed." And we see a shot of some sort of recording studio. We then see 2 desks, much like the one in the room with the radio inside of it, and that small room next to Boris. These desks were also used in the animation room, which by the use of tiles contrasting the wooden floors in almost every other room, and Henry's comment, implies that this area is newer than any other area in the studio, and was likely added in after Henry left. It then cuts to a Bendy cutout with chairs, sheet music, and a projection behind it. We can also see microphones hanging from the ceiling, along with the bass, a drum, and the music note used to signify the record used to power the ink machine. We then hear an orchestra warming up before the image then cuts to black with the sounds of both the projector and the lever we pulled to turn on the ink machine. The words Chapter 2 phases in and we hear more of Bendy whistling. The second trailer was just a very similar shot of Bendy, but this time with a more saturated image, and the date April 18th, 2017 for Chapter 2's release. We can hear the orchestra warming up again before we hear a lever being pulled, and the video then gives us the Bendy and the Ink Machine logo with the sounds of machinery behind it. That voice doesn't sound like Henry or Wally, but does sound similar to the voice we heard in the first trailer. The 4 teaser images we were given didn't give us much to go on. The first one was just an announcement of Chapter 2, the second was a stairwell with the phrase "It's time to believe" written on the wall with the face of Bendy just above the end of the hallway, and the third is a stairwell seen in Chapter 1's updated version. The final teaser image was one of a fancier desk with a music note symbol and a poster of sheep songs with the words "It's time to believe" on the wall. It seems that this would be written by whoever we hear in the trailers. After 6 weeks of work, a few teaser images, an abandoned day job, and 2 videos later, Chapter 2 was finally released on April 18th, 2017. We see the title card along with the sounds of an orchestra before picking up right where we left off.
Oh, my head. What happened? Well, I guess there's only one thing to do. Press on. See if I can find a way out.
With our way back still blocked from before, we're able to grab the axe and break the boards on the door next to the coffin. Notice how the axe isn't on the ground like when Henry passed out. Someone's moved it, but seemed to have left the rest of the place alone and left the room without clearing the boards to the only conceivable way out. Going down the steps and the game greets us back with the board coming loose. We can see a sign labeling this area as Utility Shaft 9, and while it does have a few machines, it seems like there have been a few more additions to it. At the end of the steps, there's a counter with candles, bowls of food, and bacon soup on it. The phrase, "He will set us free," is written along with a sticker of Bendy next to it. There's also a banjo we can play, but that's only if you get easily distracted. As we walk into the area, Henry asks,
How did this place get so big?
It seems that Henry's unfamiliar with this place, meaning that this was all likely created after Henry left. We see 2 more coffins and a pentagram, this one only having 1 candle, unlike the one we woke up with, and find a recording of a new character next to some candles and another Bendy sticker.
He appears from the shadows to rain his sweet blessings upon me. The figure of ink that shines in the darkness. I see you, my savior. I pray you hear me. Those old songs, yes, I still sing them. For I know you are coming to save me, and I will be swept into your final loving embrace. But love requires sacrifice. Can I get an amen?
I said, can I get an amen?
Sammy is nowhere to be found and only asks when playing the tape the first time. He knows we're here, but isn't willing to confront us. Now I don't know about you, but some coffins with pentagrams and a man seemingly worshipping Bendy seems to me like he may have killed some people as sacrifices to him. This setup is also hard to pass off as something that was done overnight, so I don't think that we created Bendy when we turned on the machine. Rather, he was summoned by the sounds of the machine to us, and knowing this, someone decided to board up the doorway to the ink machine room as a safety precaution, and it seems to have worked. We then find our first cutout of Bendy with a pentagram behind it. We can swing at it, and it falls apart, and we can see that it had 2 pentagrams behind it instead of 1 like the coffins, and when we turn away, it's back together again. This is very reminiscent of the sketch in Chapter 1 that seems to change whenever you turn away for too long. Walking through this hallway of ink that we saw in the trailer, and we can see a strange mass of ink that seems to be stationary, but shifting around. We then see someone talking to himself and carrying a Bendy cutout.
Hello? Excuse me, can you help me? Hello? Where the hell did he go?
That's definitely Sammy. Listen to what he was saying.
Hello? Excuse me, can you help me? Hello? Where the hell did he go?
Sounds an awful lot like something that would have been the Sheep Songs cartoon with Boris. When we catch up to him, he's disappeared, but left another Bendy cutout with a pentagram behind it. There's also a bunch of bacon soup on the shelves.
Need to get power to this gate somehow. Should be a couple switches nearby. Then maybe I can open it.
Going back and finding 3 switches, we're then able to raise the gate. When we do, the light in the next room turns on and we hear a gasping noise. We're now in the music department, part of Joey Drew Studios and directed by Sammy Lawrence, along with what looks like awards and records with one seemingly missing. In the Chapter 4 update, it seems to have just been put in this gramophone. We also see 2 music note symbols on the wall like the one for the record back in Chapter 1. Both the record and the gramophone in Chapter 4 read The Lighter Side of Hell, performed by the Mitchell Orchestra Company 17625-17. There's no record ID called that, and there's no song called The Lighter Side of Hell, or any Mitchell Orchestra Company. There's not even anyone we meet with the name of Mitchell. We can see sheet music for it underneath the sign, and a gramophone with a record inside of it. So if the record should be there as an accomplishment of Sammy or the music department, why would it be if it's from another company entirely? Well, maybe it isn't. I believe that Joey Drew Studios actually bought Mitchell Orchestra and its employees to write songs for the cartoons, and whoever Mitchell's leader was didn't carry over to the music department, and so Sammy was left in charge. We're then able to play another tape.
So first, Joey installs this ink machine over our heads. Then it begins to leak. 3 times last month we couldn't even get out of our department because the ink had flooded the stairwell. Joey's solution? An ink pump to drain it periodically. Now I have this ugly pump switch right in my office. People in and out all day. Thanks, Joey. Just what I needed. More distractions. These stupid cartoon songs don't write themselves, you know?
So he's not only just the director, but the songwriter as well. This doesn't sound like the creepy, obsessed Sammy we heard before, so it's a safe bet that this recording takes place before things went downhill. We come across another Bendy cutout, only this time if we chop it down, it stays down. It would seem that any Bendy cutout not behind any sort of pentagram doesn't have the same supernatural properties as the ones that are. And if the pentagrams do have some sort of supernatural property, then that explains why Sammy disappeared before we caught up to him. Heading over to the light we saw before, and we see an exit.
Looks like the stairwell's flooded. If I'm gonna get out of here, I'll need to find a way to drain it.
Flipping the power switch, and we're now hunting for Sammy's office to find the pump switch. That is until... these are called searchers. Now in the newest version they don't just appear, but a blob of ink falls from the pipe above before the first one appears out from this puddle. And the rest all appear from surrounding puddles that aren't just part of the ground, but blobs sitting on top of the floor waiting to pop up. It seems that we're invading their space, and they don't take too kindly to strangers. Swinging your axe at them kills them in one swing, but if you miss then you'll begin to take damage. This image overlaid when we take damage is the exact same as the one we see when Henry wakes up. Take too much damage over too short of amount of time, and... yep, you would have to start the entire chapter over again. Now fortunately the devs did patch this up with pentagrams that would act like checkpoints, which would later be replaced with statues and punching clocks, as well as this in the final version. This strange, inky vortex with a light at the end. Now this sounds like a bunch of whispers of lost souls, until... it's just a bunch of Henry's lines. Now I'm torn on the intentions of this, considering that in the beginning, the only consequence to this was starting the whole chapter over again, but later would have larger consequences not only in this extra area, which would seem to be trying to tell us something, but also in the fact that this changes the game in terms of accessibility, which I'll talk about more later on. After killing all the searchers, the gate to our left is raised, and a sign that could be seen before is now flashing the word recording, and we hear a song called Sammy's Jam. Why would the door open now, and why would that music play? It's obvious that Sammy knows that we're here before this, since he was nearest when we played the recording, so it's possible that he's taken some time for him to set all this up, and he's playing the music to show that this is his domain. Going through the hallway, we come to a room with just a microphone and an organ. Playing the organ, and we hear this. If you play the organ enough, you get the achievement Johnny's Broken Heart. We can only assume that someone has some sort of connection to this organ, and this is causing them distress. Either that or they really hate the sound of the organ, which, by the way Henry plays, I wouldn't exactly doubt to be the case. The next room we see is from one of the teaser images, with two desks like the one we saw in the radio room in Chapter 1 and in the small room past before us. We also see some sort of artwork on the wall, another picture of a music note, and more sheet music of the record as well. As for the model sheet, which is fan art, the message "Don't let Joey see this" was added in by the devs and hints that Joey didn't take too lightly with jokes about his characters or his business. At the end of the hall, we see a plaque for Sammy Lawrence's office. Inside, we can see the pump switch, a desk, and the phrase "It's time to believe" written on the wall.
Well, there's the pump switch, alright. But that's one hell of a leak blocking the door, though. If I could just stop that ink from flowing, maybe I can get in.
Now I think at this point between the desks, record, radio, and writing, that Sammy was likely the one in the radio room in Chapter 1. But since we only see Sammy either wearing shoes or without feet in general, then the footprints we see leading to the pub room are likely someone else's. Fortunately, with no idea of where to go where we could stop the ink, we've got another fetch quest on our hands.
So I go to get my dustpan from the hall closet the other day, and guess what? I can't find my stupid keys. It's like they disappeared into thin air or something. All I can think of is that they must have fallen in one of the garbage cans as I was making my rounds last week. I just hope nobody tells Sammy, because if he finds out I lost my keys again, I'm out of here.
Now, the Meatly actually tweeted out this message in regards to the tape. Why would Wally leave his keys in the trash for 30 years? It's almost as if he never got the chance to go back for them. Since Wally never got the chance to find his keys, this is likely the last recording of him that we find before the studio went downhill, meaning that all of the tapes we hear came before this one. It also explains why Wally just left evidence of his negligence in front of his boss's office, since he likely meant to get rid of it before Sammy saw it. Now we have to retrace Wally's steps and look for a pair of keys. Going back a bit and past the recording sign, we come into this big recording studio with instruments, a separate recording booth, and 2 separate balconies, one with a projector and the other with a Bendy cutout. If you count the chairs on the bandstand, you'll find that there are 9 chairs. There's also a sheet music stand facing the opposite direction, which likely would have been for the conductor. However, I don't believe this is Sammy, as Sammy was already the songwriter and the director of the music department altogether. We were attacked by 7 searchers already, but if we go back through the ink-filled hallway, we encounter another searcher, and one more at the pentagram with a single candle. That makes 9 searchers total. 9 searchers for 9 chairs. And one more at the exit for the conductor. It seems that this was the orchestra, and the band which played the songs here were turned into these inky monsters like Sammy was. One odd thing of note is that the sheet music says The Lighter Side of Hell, but it seems that it's already been recorded by the record we found upstairs. Why is this here? Well, I honestly have no good explanation. The best I could do is say that the company wanted to recreate the piece for the cartoon so they wouldn't be sued for copyright, but even that theory has its obvious flaws. We can also see Bendy watching us from the left balcony. It seems that we can't break him, and the way he came from is completely blocked off. Above the recording booth, we can see a Bendy face that's been more worn down than the cutouts or stickers that we've seen, and below it's another tape which introduces us to a new character, or rather, 2 new characters.
It may only be my second month working for Joey Drew, but I can already tell I'm gonna love it here. People really seem to enjoy my Alice Angel voice. Sammy says she may be as popular as Bendy someday. These past few weeks, I voiced everything from talking chairs to dancing chickens, but this is the first character I really felt a connection with. Like she's a part of me. Alice and I, we're going places.
Though the tape has no real significance to what's going on at the moment, it is an introduction to 2 new characters and the connection between the 2. Continuing our search, and we go past a poster for Alice Angel. Since this is our first time seeing her, and Henry wasn't here when the department was created, and the recording only has Susie voicing her recently, it seems that Henry had already left when Alice had been created and Susie had been hired. In the corner of the poster, we see Bendy's signature smile. To the right of the poster, we can open the door to a room with more sheet music and a pool table with the balls all set up. Playing for a bit and you may realize that something's a bit off with one of these balls. Yup, that's definitely an eye. Now, we've not met anyone with eyes missing, or anyone with human eyes for that matter. This room was added in the Chapter 4 update, and unlike most rooms that were added in later on, this one didn't even have a locked door in previous versions. Going up the stairs, and we're up at the projector with more machinery and another tape.
Every day the same strange thing happens. I'll be up here in my booth, the band will be swinging, and suddenly Sammy Lawrence just comes marching in and shuts the whole thing down. Tells us all to wait in the hall. Then I hear something. He starts up my projector and he dashes from the projection booth and down to the recording studio like the little devil himself was chasing behind. A few seconds later, projector turns on. But Sammy, oh no, he don't come out for a long time. This man is weird, crazy weird. I've got half a mind to talk to Mr. Drew about all this, I really do. But then again, I have to admit, Mr. Drew's got his own peculiarities.
Now, we'll come back to this tape in a moment, though it's important to point out that Norman isn't a part of the band, but plays a different role, and he couldn't be the conductor since the conductor would typically have a stand in front of the band where we see an extra set of sheet music facing away from the band. While we don't have much to go on, one job that isn't out of place for this era would be a projectionist, someone who knows how to use and maintain projectors. though the projectors back in the day tended to be a tad more complex than the ones we see in the studio. This also means that the plushie we found back in the projector room in Chapter 1 could belong to Norman. Looking down at the band, we can see our cutout friend has come down from the balcony. Turning on the projector, and it plays, well, nothing. Well, at least originally. Now a brief loop from the cartoon Tombstone picnic place. Going down the steps, and we see the exact same worn-down Bendy face as in the band room. Eventually we find the keys, and after unlocking the closet door, we can open to see unlit candles, a bowl of food, and a dustpan, as well as more bacon soup. Though Wally's keys have been in the trash for 30 years, someone who worships Bendy must have left this here as some sort of offering. Someone who has the ability to teleport, or who has an extra set of keys. Playing the tape, and we find more about Sammy's strange behavior.
Every artistic person needs a sanctuary. Joey Drew has his, and I've got mine. To enter, you need only know my favorite song. The violin shudders with a piercing voice. The drum thunders in triumph. The banjo playfully clucks. The piano delicately calls. Sing my song, and my sanctuary will open to you.
Yeah, I don't know why the transcript is like that, but I'm pretty sure it's just a bug. Now, one thing people get hung up on is the reasoning behind these tapes. Why leave them all over the place, and why would Wally leave a tape that could get him fired right in front of Sammy's office? While I have already explained Wally's tape, I don't think all of them have particular rhyme or reason apart from helping the plot move along. Though this one in the closet makes sense to me, since Wally seems to be either a janitor or has some sort of maintenance job, and he would need to know how to get in every single room in order to clean it, including Sammy's sanctuary. As for this tape and Norman's, I don't think Sammy has gone insane, nor has the studio fallen apart at the time of these recordings being made, but rather Sammy was just an artist looking to get some peace and quiet since his office isn't exactly free of distractions anymore.
People in and out all day.
That, or maybe he is insane and this is just an early stage of it. As for Joey and his sanity, it's anyone's guess. Assuming the machine already exists, hence the pump switch and Sammy's need for a sanctuary, then either Joey is just a boss who Norman doesn't quite understand, or Joey's already had everyone go through the whole ritual process, and with Norman included, using the plushie we found in the projector room. On our way to play the instruments, we're attacked by another searcher, catching us off guard. I think the goal here was for the developers to try and make us forget the instruments we have to play in a moment of blind panic, which was a pretty good idea, even if they did remove it later down the line. We then turn on the projector and play the instruments. And then the door next to the recording booth slowly opens. Why does the projector need to be on? Why do we need to play instruments to open a door? I have no idea. Looking up in the balcony, and it seems our cutout friend has some company. Going back and forth from the projector to the band pit, and we can get up to 9 cutouts to appear, and get the achievement, Strike Up the Band. Again, 9 chairs, 9 cutouts, and 9 searchers. Heading inside the sanctuary, and we see various instruments, which seems to imply that this was also a supply closet. There's a toilet, a desk, more sheet music, another pentagram, and writing on the wall. Sing a happy song, whistle a merry tune, wait for his arrival, he's coming very soon. After turning the valve, one of the cutouts decides to say hello again. Looking up, we see Sammy watching us from above, and that he's moved the cutouts aside. Maybe the cutouts aren't moving them themselves, but he's moving them, and was even the one to make the cutout in Chapter 1 pop out at us, since at that point he couldn't have been in the radio room. Also, notice how the front of his mask is the exact same as the 2 worn down faces of Bendy we've seen before. It's almost like it's either intentional, or this was just a reused design by the developers. Walking out, and we're attacked again. The door is locked until we kill 7 searchers, but there's another one in the back of the room. We can also destroy the cutout that jumped out from before. In the original, at this point we would have access to Sammy's office, but now we have to walk past these crates and chairs. Originally all we could see was that this was some sort of infirmary, but after the Chapter 4 update we can now go down the stairs and see it for ourselves. Above the steps we get a warning for employees to not fake any illness or they won't be paid that week's wages. We then meet another searcher, bringing the total that have attacked us back up to 9. If there is a parallel to the number of cutouts, chairs, and band members, and these are the same searchers that we fought before, then it would seem the searchers have the ability to respawn. It may even be hinted at when we defeat them, because it almost seems as if they're jumping right back into their puddles. We also see another gramophone with, again, the lighter side of hell inside of it. Over by the bed we see another cutout, an eyesight reading poster, as well as a power switch with utility access written on it.
Oh no, there's no valve. Where did it go?
Pulling the lever and heading down the steps, we see another Bendy cutout, the door opening to our right, and a shadow of Sammy to our left. He's definitely watching us. We then head down the sewer-like area and we see a swollen searcher with a hat holding the valve.
Was that thing holding my valve?
Looking around and we can see the messages, "Down here we're all sinners," and "The sheep will come to slaughter." The reference to sheep likely comes from two places. The poster we see Boris in all over is called Bendy and Sheep Songs with Boris the Wolf. What we heard Sammy singing from before is likely from that cartoon.
Hello? Excuse me, can you help me?
I do find Sammy's obsession with this particular song odd, since the cartoon Tombstone Picnic is playing on the projector, and the sheet music and records for The Lighter Side of Hell are everywhere. The other possible reference is a biblical one, referring to sheep being used to describe people of God, which would also coincide with the term sin or sinners. I only see this as a possibility since this is a world with demons and angels, and early cartoons use biblical reference quite often. We then pass a desk with more sheet music and another tape.
I love the quiet, and that's hard to come by in these busy times. And yeah, sure, it may stink to high heaven down here, but it's just perfect for an old lyricist like me. Sammy's songs always got some bounce, but if I didn't get away once in a while, they'd never have any words to go with them. So I'll keep my mind to singing and my nose closed.
So we now know that Sammy wrote the music, but not the lyrics. This is kind of odd considering that it seems he's been the one writing on the walls about Bendy and sheep. Past the desk, we find another Bendy cutout in this room with two massive cylinders, a crate with the word "Sing With Me" behind it on the wall, and the searcher with the valve. Since Jack is the one who wrote the lyrics, it seems like he would have written this. Chasing the searcher does us no good, but we can pull the switches on one of the cylinders to lift the crate, bait him to stand under it, and crush him by pulling the other switch in order to get the valve.
Sorry I had to do that. Nice hat, though.
It seems that as long as they're not attacking him, Henry does feel bad for hurting the searchers. Now, to me, this whole area seems just so superfluous, since it does next to nothing to move the plot along, and this is pretty obvious, especially when you realize that the original version didn't need this area to begin with, and without it, the story is pretty much the same. Making our way back up, and we no longer see Sammy's shadow. We turn the valve and are now able to access Sammy's office.
Okay, that should do it.
Inside, we see two more music symbols on the wall, the Illusion of Living book and the garbage bin, implying that Sammy doesn't like the book or doesn't agree with its message, a radio that plays Build Our Machine, and a blueprint for the Ink Machine. Nothing about the design itself truly stands out as significant to me, apart from the description. Client, Joey Drew Studios. Attention, Wally Franks. Janitorial duty, HFA. There's also one more name as well. Repair, Murray Hill. There's no reference to Thomas Connor or the Gent Company, which would seem to imply that Wally was the one who built and or designed the original Ink Machine, and the one we see today is the one that was designed and built by Thomas and the Gent Company. By what we hear in Chapter 1 by Thomas, it sounds like Wally wasn't much better engineer as he was a janitor.
I know something about pressure, I don't. Or he's some kind of idiot.
We can also tell this is only part of the whole blueprint or instruction manual because there are references to a manual as well as various other page numbers. This was likely part of the manual used while installing the ink pump and was just left here on accident. And seeing that this was here in the original version before the new ink machine was added, and this only accounts for one tube going through the bottom of the ink machine as opposed to the 7 we see here, this is definitely a blueprint for the original ink machine, meaning that it's possible that it's still floating around the studio somewhere. Pulling the pump switch and we can head back to the small office space to see that Meatley has taken up a new instrument.
What the heck is this?
We begin to make our way to the stairs until...
Rest your head. It's time for bed. There we go now, nice and tight. We wouldn't want our sheep roaming away now, would we? No, we wouldn't. I must admit, I am honored you came all the way down here to visit me. It almost makes what I'm about to do seem cruel. But the believers must honor their savior. I must have him notice me. Wait, you look familiar to me. That face. Not now, for our Lord is calling to us, my little sheep. The time of sacrifice is at hand.
Okay, pause. So, Sammy brought us down here to be sacrificed by Bendy and has no memory of who we are, though it seems as if he should. While his name may not be on the record in Chapter 1, it certainly seems like it belongs to him. While you could argue that Sammy actually knew and remembers Henry, remember, Sammy's memory is scrambled and he's been living a life where he worships the only character with discernible features we've seen so far, and everything we've seen living down here are far from looking human, so he could just as easily be remembering what a human face looks like, or at one point simply seeing a picture of Henry, someone who worked at the company and seems to have done the job of about 5 people, and Sammy just simply has a vague memory of that picture. Originally, Sammy just knocked us out with nothing, though in the Chapter 4 update, the dustpan was added in. I will say, compared to the original version of this chapter, his movements make him seem more sophisticated and alive, but his design as either a cultist or a songwriter doesn't come across very well. Maybe if he has music notes all over his overalls, that would be easier to get the idea that he's a musical artist gone insane, because for the most part, all we see him do is talk. But he wasn't the one in the studio who wrote the lyrics, he was the one who wrote the music. And because the Chapter 4 expansion is what causes this plot hole with the introduction of Jack Fane, the expansion is not only unnecessary, but also adds a plot hole to the original idea.
And then I will finally be freed from this prison, this inky, dark abyss I call a body. Shh. Quiet. Listen. I can hear him crawling above. Crawling. Let us begin. The ritual must be completed. Soon he will hear me. He will set us free.
You could put that on a shirt or something. He then walks into a room where we see a small desk and a microphone, and he begins to speak as the door in front of us is opened.
Sheep, 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 it's time for sleep. Rest your head, it's time for bed. In the morning, you may wake, or in the morning, you'll be dead. Hear me, Bendy. Arise from the darkness. Arise and claim my offering. Free me, I beg you. I summon you, ink demon. Show your face and take this tender sheep. No, my lord, stay back. I am your prophet. I am your God.
We see a puddle come out from under the door as we break free, grab our axe, and then have to fight off even more searchers. This time it's only 5, so there doesn't seem to be any significance there. Fighting them off, we chop our way through some more boards, and to our right, we can see a room where the ink machine is descending. However, in Chapter 1, even after Bendy jump scares us, we can see the ink machine is still just there. It hasn't moved. Maybe the lift was holding it up and it eventually ran out of power? We can still see the generator rumbling even after Bendy jump scares us, though I can't imagine those power cells last forever. And just when you think we might be seeing a glimmer of sunlight like we did in the ink machine room, we instead see a light coming from some sort of second walkway above us, likely where Bendy was when we hear him crawling. As we keep breaking more wooden planks, our axe breaks, and we come across another hallway flooded with ink, with the way to our left blocked off. Moving towards the hallway, and Bendy appears and chases you. We're then able to go to where we were blocked off before and make our way to this room. Don't bother looking at the scenery though, because if you wait too long, this is unless, of course, Bendy gets stuck on a barrel. If at any point you look back at Bendy, you can see he's running with a limp. Two of the flashing images we see at the end of Chapter 1 are a wheelchair and Bendy, with an ink machine between the two. This sequence would seem to imply that someone had to use a wheelchair, was put through the ink machine, and was turned into Bendy, now being able to walk, but with a limp. You can also approach the ink-filled hallway where Bendy spawns if you go backwards, and you can hear whistling coming from the door, as well as sounds of the ink machine. We keep running until we get to this doorway, which then shuts behind us. Once we're inside, we can hear banging on the door. The only reason I'm not saying we hear Bendy knocking at the door is because in every single version of this game, we see him disappear before the door closes, as well as his ink pattern around him, which I'm going to call his presence, disappears. If you recall, in the Chapter 3 version, the ink pattern that we see on the wall is Bendy's presence. Just like how we see him at the end of the end credits in Chapter 1, it seems that he is nearby. Looking at the layout from where we wake up to where Bendy begins chasing us, it seems that Sammy opened the door in front of us in order to summon Bendy from the hallway. One issue I do have is if Sammy is literally right behind that door, shouldn't we see Bendy's presence? I really have no good explanation as to why this is, since it sounds pretty clear that Bendy is the one attacking him, though it's possible that Bendy does have some level of control over it since we don't see it in the ink until he jumps out from under it, and we also don't see it when he pops out to jump scare us in Chapter 1. At least, not in the final version. Back to the room where we escape from Bendy, and we see a bunch of Bendy plushes on shelves, some missing where a splatter of ink is, as well as the symbol for them in Chapter 1, and the words Vault S3 can be seen above the door ahead of us in Chapter 2's version, which we removed in Chapter 3. And heading inside we can see empty shelves, a sign for a lift, and barrels covered in ink. As we begin to walk inside, suddenly...
Hello? Someone there? I know you're in here. Come out and show yourself. Boris?
At the end of the end credits in the original Chapter 2, we then get this image where we can see unlit candles, a Bendy cutout, and an axe next to Sammy's mask with what seems to be his torso and his head squished on the floor. And so ends Chapter 2. Out of all the chapters, this one's by far the most average. And that's not really a bad thing. It doesn't do anything too far out there, but it doesn't give us anything stale or boring. And while I don't like the fanbase around Sammy, or that they decided to give him a more muscular build later on, because we all know why they really added that in, he's still an interesting character. I do think the sewer section was completely unnecessary since it didn't really move the plot along, but still, I don't mind this chapter. And with that, we can move on to Chapter 3.
And I'm back. Okay. So, yeah, after 2 months of silence, I'm finally able to upload another video. Things just kind of got really complicated. I needed to take a break because between script writing and everything that kind of happened, I just needed to walk away from everything. The classes were still busy, so I couldn't exactly take a break from that. So ultimately, my YouTube stuff is just kind of what I had to suffer from all this. But thankfully, the school year is nearing the end. I may not have as much free time as I'd like to keep working on videos, but hopefully I can upload a little more frequently. I'm hoping to upload a review by the end of next month. It may even be 2 games if I'm lucky and able to work that out. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a gap. I'm going to review a couple of games, going to get back to live streaming a little bit more. Not sure when I'm going to do that, but it's going to be coming down the line. But yeah, hopefully there's a little bit more from me. Hopefully you're still enjoying this. So hopefully if Bendy isn't really your thing and you've just been sticking with me, there's a couple of other things that are coming down the line. Nothing in terms of a series, it's just kind of throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks, kind of like my Wander Song review. That's kind of the video I'm proudest of as it stands on its own. So I'm hoping to kind of be able to do a little bit more of that. And if you haven't already and you want to, then I do have a membership option. It gives you kind of behind the scenes to my scripts, to early access to my videos, behind the scenes, all that jazz. If you're interested, I'm going to start using it as just kind of a backlog for everything. And I'm also going to try and upload a behind the scenes before I ultimately delete this file, because I think it's almost a full tetrabyte of Bendy stuff, so I need to start clearing some stuff out before I start working on the next one. And hopefully you all did enjoy this video. I know it got a little bit scrappy at the end, but that was just kind of the pacing. I tried fixing that, and that may just kind of be where it is. The first video got over, 500 views. I completely didn't expect that. My channel feels like it's kind of just dead in the water after Fandroid, and, feeling like I still have some sense of relevancy or audience means a lot to me. So whether or not you're here for that, you're here for the reviews, and you're somehow just sticking with it, even to the end of this video, thank you. And hopefully I'll be able to keep doing this down the line. I have no intention of stopping. And yeah, I'm back. I'm finally able to make videos again, and just kind of do whatever. So, I know I'm going to be repeating myself, but I gotta end it somehow, so thank you. I'll see you guys after the review, and then it'll be right back to Bendy Chapter 3. So, yeah. Thank you, and yeah. See ya.